Before we embark on creating this unique story, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new plots, mysteries, or custom adventures. Shall we begin? The light rain that morning in Boston cast a damp sheen over the city, reflected on the dark asphalt. Ambulances arrived and departed from St. Augustine Hospital in a steady stream, while exhausted staff struggled to keep up the pace during a seemingly endless shift. Among them was Emily Carter, a 32-year-old nurse who had learned to hide her fatigue behind a firm and focused demeanor. Her hands were nimble, her eyes sharp, and even when the weight of the world seemed to push her down, she found a way to keep going. She was known to all for her quiet discipline and for not wasting time on unnecessary conversations. Emily was practical, efficient, but there was something in her gaze, a subtle shadow, that suggested a life built more on necessity than choice. She didn't complain, didn't ask too many questions, and rarely let her worries show. To many, she was just another competent professional. To a few, she was someone who carried more responsibilities than she could admit. That same morning, the team was alerted to the arrival of an urgently transferred patient, a man in his 40s, a victim of a car accident. His condition was stable, but he required continuous observation. This was not uncommon, and Emily followed the procedures with the necessary composure, without imagining that her routine was about to change. When the man was led to his private room, Emily noticed something different. It wasn't just the type of accommodation, too luxurious, too quiet, but the way the hospital administration seemed uneasy. There were supervisors circulating in the corridors, quick whispers, averted glances. That activity suggested that this patient was no ordinary person, but no one seemed willing to explain why. While adjusting the heart monitor beside the bed, Emily observed the still unconscious patient. He had striking features, but nothing that immediately gave away his identity. No extravagant watch, no jewelry, no flashy details. Just the clothes torn from the accident and the deep breathing of someone struggling with pain. The name on the chart was Ethan Graves, a name common enough to go unnoticed, but strange enough to awaken a slight unease in Emily. She felt she had heard that surname before. As the hours passed, the pressure on the hospital increased. A black car, accompanied by 2 discreet security guards, parked at the back of the building. The administrative staff tried to stop the rumors from spreading, but the hospital environment had its own way of turning silence into speculation. Still, no one dared to say anything aloud. Emily, as always, didn't get involved. She meticulously completed her shift, supervising medications, adjusting equipment, and recording information, but she cautiously observed the activity around Ethan's room. There was something profoundly incoherent in the contrast between the seemingly ordinary patient and the invisible tension that hung in the air. When he finally had a short break, he drank coffee in the empty cafeteria. The television, at a low volume, broadcast news about the economy. A reporter was commenting on the expansion of a business conglomerate that had been buying smaller companies across the country. Her name appeared in the corner of the screen, Graves Corporation. It was at that moment that Emily froze, trying to mentally connect the name to the patient's chart. Coincidence? Perhaps. The surnames were common, and there were certainly dozens of people named Graves in Boston. Even so, the doubt settled in like a thread, pulling at a larger, more complex fabric. Back in the hallway, she found 2 hospital administrators talking to the director. The 3 were speaking quietly, but the tension was palpable. Upon noticing Emily approaching, they immediately ended the conversation, as if every word could represent a risk. She wasn't curious, but that attitude only reinforced the feeling that something was hidden, something that for some reason was passing right by her. During the early morning hours, Ethan woke up for the first time. His eyes opened slowly, heavy. Emily noticed the change in the machine's patterns even before he moved his head. She approached with her usual calm, focusing on his vital signs as she assessed his condition. He tried to speak, but gave up as he felt the pain course through his body. Emily simply adjusted her position and placed a soft light on his face. "You are safe," she murmured calmly, unaware that this simple gesture would be the first link between two lives that should never have crossed paths. Ethan watched her with some difficulty, as if trying to decipher her. There was something familiar in that steady gaze, in that diligent posture. Perhaps it was just the impression of someone still sleepy, confused. But the feeling remained, for him and for her. In the following days, Emily was responsible for the patient's direct care, even after warning her supervisor that other nurses could take over. Her request was denied. "Trust," they said. "Confidentiality," they added. Vague terms that raised more questions than they offered answers. Emily realized there was something bigger at stake, something she didn't understand. But while she followed each instruction meticulously, she didn't imagine that this man, seemingly just another patient, was, in fact, the new owner of the hospital where she worked, and that his silent recovery, hidden from the public eye, had implications that even the newspapers didn't dare speculate on. Meanwhile, far away, news of a high-impact corporate restructuring circulated quietly. Acquisitions, mass layoffs, reorganizations, the kind of change that always left traces but rarely reached the hospital corridors. Until now. Emily continued on, unaware that each step she took that night would shape the course of her own life, and that the greatest conflict was yet to begin. Dawn in Boston carried a biting chill that day, and the still damp streets reflected the metallic glint of the first lights from the buildings. St. Augustine Hospital was slowly waking up, but Emily Carter was already on the move, walking through the corridors with firm steps. The early morning had given her more questions than answers, and although she tried to stay focused on her work, she couldn't ignore the presence of Ethan Graves, now awake, though still weak, and everything that seemed to move around him. The hospital had undergone several renovations in recent years, funded by anonymous donations. Emily had always suspected the money came from someone with a lot to hide. With Ethan's arrival, the idea gained more traction. The hospital, with its wide corridors, freshly painted walls, and equipment too modern for a building that had previously struggled with its budget, now seemed part of a larger puzzle. The staff talked about the improvements, but no one knew for sure who was behind them. In Ethan's room, the large window let in the cool morning light. He rested more serenely, but his eyes remained constantly attentive to his surroundings, as if trying to understand who was around him. Emily entered silently, checking the heart monitor before straightening the bedsheets. Ethan observed every movement with restrained curiosity. Although he wasn't one to get involved with patients, Emily sensed that there was something different about him. Not exactly because of the unusual circumstances, but because of the way he observed everything, not with the common fragility of someone in recovery, but with the calculated firmness of someone accustomed to managing much more complex situations. As Emily went about her work, she noticed details that would have previously gone unnoticed. The discreet security guards positioned in the hallways, the constant presence of administrators feigning routines that never existed. One of them, the hospital director, walked with stiff steps, always glued to his cell phone. It was as if an entire operation had been set up around that room. As the days passed, other characters became part of that silent plot. One of them was Liam Hawkins, the head nurse. A middle-aged man, efficient but with a temperament difficult to categorize, sometimes kind, sometimes strangely evasive. Liam seemed to know more about the patient than he admitted, but maintained a professional posture that prevented any openness. "Emily, continue with the Graves case. We received direct instructions," he said one morning, while organizing files on his messy desk. "Instructions from whom?" she asked, more out of inconsistency than curiosity. Liam hesitated for a brief moment, just long enough to betray that he couldn't reveal the source. For someone so experienced, that pause spoke volumes. Board of directors, he murmured, looking away. Emily didn't press the issue. Her job didn't depend on knowing more. However, the way Liam seemed torn between following orders and protecting the team said a lot about the kind of pressure that was on the hospital. At the same time, the routine of ordinary patients continued, emergency surgeries, corridors filled with stories that didn't involve corporate secrets. Emily cared for everyone with the same dedication, but Ethan occupied a growing space in her routine and, unintentionally, in her thoughts. During a particularly busy afternoon, a new character entered the scene. Ava Morgan, a corporate communications consultant. Young, sophisticated, always impeccably dressed and with a strategic eye, she walked through the hospital as if analyzing every inch of the space. Emily saw her observing Ethan's room before speaking with the director. Ava had a posture that seemed too confident to be there by chance, and her brief, assessing, almost clinical glance toward Emily suggested that she was cataloguing everyone involved in Ethan's care. Behind the scenes, the hospital was filled with murmurs, vague comments about mergers, about internal changes that would affect the entire institution. The atmosphere of uncertainty was palpable. For Emily, this meant only one thing: something big was about to happen, and somehow she was at the center of that change. Interactions with Ethan began to become more frequent. He was already able to converse in a limited way, and Emily couldn't ignore the way he observed her, with a kind of silent recognition, but without revealing more than necessary. Have you worked here for a long time?" he asked one afternoon, his voice hoarse and measured. Emily answered, without taking her eyes off the instrument she was adjusting. "Enough," he smiled despite the pain. "Straightforward. I like that." She didn't react. She maintained professional neutrality, but something about that phrase kept resonating. At the same time, Emily's past began to insinuate itself into the narrative. She lived in a simple apartment in a remote neighborhood and had cared for her teenage sister Lucy since the sudden death of their parents. It was this sense of responsibility that had always shaped her life and that made her so resilient to any unexpected change. Lucy, witty and determined, constantly inquired about the work. Emily avoided mentioning Ethan, perhaps to protect her sister, perhaps because she couldn't explain something she herself didn't fully understand. In the hospital, the American culture of efficiency, competitiveness, and hierarchies seemed amplified. There was tension between departments, veiled disputes, and a constant struggle against budget cuts. All of this was part of the broader context in which Emily, a brilliant professional but invisible to management, was trying to survive. As the days passed, it became clear that Ethan was not just a recovering patient. His presence stirred internal dynamics, exposed management weaknesses, and subtly provoked unease among employees. And although Emily tried to remain neutral, she couldn't deny that her direct responsibility for him gave her access to details she should never have seen. With each new shift, she felt she was entering territory where corporate secrets, hidden ambitions, and intertwined lives mingled in a way that could easily shatter her carefully constructed routine. And yet, she continued. Little did she know that she would soon be not just a caregiver, but a fundamental part of a story that spanned the very top of the American business elite. The following days at St. Augustine Hospital revealed that Ethan Graves's recovery was not merely a complex clinical case. It was an event that was quietly reshaping alliances, amplifying tensions, and bringing to the surface deep layers of instability within the institution. Emily Carter perceived this movement as one observes changes in the tide. The signs were there, subtle, almost imperceptible, but pointing to something inevitable. Now more aware and with his lucidity gradually returning, Ethan was beginning to realize the extent of his physical fragility. It wasn't easy for him, someone accustomed to absolute control, to depend on others, even to sit up in bed. Emily was the one who had the most contact with this vulnerable version of him, and even though she maintained a professional demeanor, she perceived the silent frustration that accumulated with each failed attempt to regain autonomy. One afternoon, during an initial physiotherapy session, Ethan tried to stand up on his own before the physiotherapist arrived. Emily found him leaning against the chair, his muscles trembling under the strain. "That's reckless," she said, quickly stepping forward to steady his arm. He took a deep breath, annoyed with himself. "I'm tired of feeling useless." Emily offered no words of comfort. She simply helped him sit up in bed again and adjusted the pillow behind him, firm but not too roughly. "Recovery has stages. Skipping any of them can put you right back at square one." Ethan looked at her, and there was something in that look. Not pride, but a kind of uneasy recognition that made him sigh and accept her guidance. This kind of direct, unadorned interaction created an unexpected dynamic between the two. Emily didn't treat him as someone special. She showed no apprehension. She didn't try to please him. For her, Ethan was a patient, period. For him, this was more than just a novelty. It was uncomfortable and intriguing. Meanwhile, outside Ethan's room, the conflict was taking shape. The security guards who had previously only appeared occasionally were now constantly patrolling the corridors. Staff whispered about the presence of outsiders in the hospital. Liam Hawkins, the head nurse, seemed torn between following orders and keeping the team safe from the chaos that was slowly taking hold. On a tense morning, Emily saw Liam arguing with the hospital director, Dr. Harrison, at the end of the hallway. The conversation was muffled, but the director's raised voice made it clear that something was out of control. "This change would be a disaster for all of us," Liam whispered, his face stiff. "The order came from above." "We have no choice," the director retorted before walking away. Emily didn't ask anything. Liam didn't explain either, but the worried look he gave her said enough. The decisions made in that boardroom were directly related to Ethan. Ava Morgan's presence also intensified. The consultant circulated through the hospital, asking questions about internal processes, evaluating protocols, and observing employees as if she were compiling a confidential report. She appeared in Ethan's room more than once, always with the same elegant and controlled demeanor. "The board wants daily updates," she told Emily, writing something down on her tablet. "My focus is on the patient, not the advice," Emily replied curtly. Ava slowly raised her eyes, analyzing the nurse as if trying to classify her into some strategic category. "I understand. But it's important to remember that everything that happens here has broader consequences." Emily didn't react. She simply continued adjusting Ethan's medication, while Ava left the room, leaving an implicit threat hanging in the air. Perhaps unintentional, perhaps not. And then came the first major obstacle, the announcement that the hospital would undergo internal restructuring. Rumors spread quickly. Staff reductions, changes in leadership, a complete overhaul of departments. For the team, this meant instability. For Emily, it meant danger, especially with Lucy depending on her job and financial stability. She tried to remain calm, but she could tell the atmosphere was growing increasingly tense. At the same time, Ethan began to question his own situation. In brief conversations with Emily, he tried to understand the level of involvement the administration had in his recovery. "Are they taking good care of the hospital?" he asked one day while Emily was changing the bandages. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "I don't know what's going on, but the hospital has changed since you arrived." Ethan frowned. This shouldn't happen, but it's happening. This simple exchange awakened something in Ethan, even weakened. His mind began to function with the precision of a man accustomed to solving complex problems, and for the first time he realized that this hospital, his new acquisition, was on the verge of an internal crisis. As the conflict intensified, Other dynamics emerged. Nurses worried about their jobs, administrators stressed by the orders they received, patients outraged by delays caused by internal turmoil, and, at the epicenter, Emily and Ethan, each dealing with their own burdens, unaware yet of how intertwined their stories were. The impending restructuring created an atmosphere of constant insecurity, and even without understanding all the details, Emily felt she was being pulled into a whirlpool she hadn't chosen. But this external conflict, growing, threatening, inevitable, was only beginning to reveal its true impact. Ethan, now more aware, was also beginning to realize that his accident was no mere coincidence. There were too many unanswered questions, and he, still confined to bed, unable to act fully, needed to trust the only person who remained by his side without ulterior motives, the nurse, who didn't know who he was. And the conflict, already raging, continued to deepen, preparing the ground for revelations that would change everything. The weeks following the announcement of the restructuring at St. Augustine Hospital brought a climate of growing tension. The once organized and predictable environment began to acquire a tone of silent urgency, as if everyone were expecting something to collapse at any moment. Emily Carter walked the corridors with her usual efficiency, but now with her senses more alert. She felt the invisible weight of expectations she didn't fully understand. Expectations that seemed to focus on her and her involuntary connection with Ethan Graves. Meanwhile, several subplots emerged, each contributing to a more complex scenario. Among them was the situation of Lucy, Emily's sister. The bright and energetic teenager had been facing difficulties at school. Her behavior had changed, and Emily noticed it immediately. Lucy was more withdrawn, avoided talking about classes, and her grades began to subtly decline. When Emily tried to talk to her, she received evasive answers. "I'm just tired," said the girl, turning her head to the side to avoid her sister's gaze. Emily knew it wasn't just exhaustion. Between the grueling work and long shifts, she couldn't give Lucy the attention she wanted, and deep down she felt guilty about it. But there was no time nor space to delve into the matter at that moment. Her mind was divided between the hospital, Ethan's situation, and the domestic routine that was beginning to slip through her fingers. At the hospital, Liam Hawkins was also facing his own internal conflicts. Although he tried to remain composed in front of the team, Emily noticed the subtle signs of his deterioration. Deeper, dark circles under his eyes, tense shoulders, the moments when he retreated to his office to breathe before dealing with yet another administrative crisis. The announced restructuring would affect not only positions, but the entire work dynamic, and Liam feared for the future of the team he had cared for and trained for years. Ava Morgan, for her part, intensified her visits to the hospital. She seemed to observe every detail, from the nurse's posture to the state of the equipment. Always elegant, she walked through the corridors as if she owned the place. But behind the impeccable appearance, there was something more, an almost tactical coldness, as if she were analyzing each person as an element to be moved on a complex chessboard. During a private conversation with Director Harrison, Ava mentioned Emily's name. "She's too close to the patient," he stated matter-of-factly, as if talking about a number on a spreadsheet. "She's competent," the director replied somewhat uncomfortably. "Competent doesn't mean controllable." Emily, who was passing by in the hallway at the time, heard only fragments, but enough to feel an alarm going off inside her. Ava seemed determined to mold the hospital and its people according to some plan that no one fully understood. Meanwhile, Ethan continued his recovery. He struggled with physical therapy, still feeling pain that insisted on reminding him of his vulnerability. But his body was only part of the problem. Ethan's mind was also in conflict. He was beginning to realize that his prolonged absence from the helm of Graves Corporation was opening the door to internal movements he would never have authorized. "Everything is different," he murmured one afternoon, while Emily adjusted the height of the bed. "The hospital?" she asked. "All." Emily didn't answer. She knew his words weren't about the surrounding environment, but about the feeling of loss of control that haunted him. He was used to being the center of decisions, not the passive recipient of unforeseen circumstances. The atmosphere within the hospital intensified the time pressure. Rumors circulated about a crucial board meeting that would soon take place. Whispers suggested that positions would be cut, departments reorganized, and contracts scrutinized. Emily felt time running like fine sand, marking the rhythm of something about to burst. Meanwhile, an unexpected subplot emerged with the visit of a woman, discreetly listed as a distant relative in the internal report. She arrived quietly, wearing sunglasses and looking tense, asking to see Ethan. Emily, following protocol, tried to stop her. "Only authorized family members are allowed to enter." The woman took a deep breath, annoyed. "I am family." Before Emily could insist, Liam approached, visibly uncomfortable. "She has special permission," he said. Emily stepped back, carefully observing the interaction. The woman entered the room, but remained there for only a few minutes. When she left, her eyes were dark, and her hands trembled slightly. She said nothing. She simply hurried down the hallway until she disappeared. That visit left a silent mark on the hospital's atmosphere. Another important thread of the plot involved confidential documents that began circulating among some members of the board. Liam accidentally dropped a piece of paper while walking down the hallway, and Emily picked it up to hand it to him. Before he reached it, she noticed, at a glance, words like retake control, internal leak, and external interference. Liam quickly snatched the paper from her hand, thanking her in a forced manner. It was clear that forces greater than simple administrative changes were at play. The growing presence of reporters outside the hospital added another layer to the tension. Cars parked, cameras at the ready, journalists trying to capture information from distracted employees. The hospital installed makeshift security barriers, and the administration began monitoring calls and emails more rigorously. In this suffocating context, the relationship between Emily and Ethan, although still marked by professionalism, began to acquire nuances. He trusted her more than he trusted anyone else in that hospital, and she, even though suspicious of the situation around her, recognized in him someone who was fighting against something much bigger than a simple physical recovery. With time running out, external pressures colliding with internal dramas, and multiple intertwined subplots, everything pointed to the same destination, an inevitable breaking point. And although Emily didn't know it yet, when that happened, she would be in the eye of the storm, with no choice and no turning back. Tension at St. Augustine Hospital reached a point where even the air seemed thicker. Every door slam, every unexpected phone call, every hurried step through the corridors drew alarmed glances. And it was in this charged atmosphere that Emily began to notice disconnected pieces aligning, forming a picture she couldn't yet fully comprehend, but which left her uneasy with each passing second. The first twist came quietly. Late at night, after a long shift, Emily went to the records room to update pending reports. It was a place usually empty after 10 p.m., lit by fluorescent lights that hummed softly. But that night, the door was only slightly ajar, and there were voices inside. She stopped. She immediately recognized one of the voices, Liam Hawkins. "If this continues, we're going to lose control completely," he said in a low voice. The other voice was deep, firm, somehow familiar, though Emily couldn't remember hearing it before. "The council is divided, and her presence here complicates everything." "The nurse?" Liam asked. Emily froze. "Yes. She's too close to him, and you know what that means." The silence that followed was almost palpable. Emily recoiled, her heart racing. It couldn't be about her. Or could it? I didn't understand why her presence alongside Ethan would be problematic, unless there was something more at stake than an administrative restructuring. She left quickly before she was discovered, but those words kept echoing in her head like a warning she could no longer ignore. The next day, a new discovery deepened the mystery even further. Ethan had been restless since early on. Emily noticed his gaze fixed on the window, his jaw clenched, his body tense despite the evident pain when he moved. "Did you sleep badly?" she asked. "I dreamt of noises, footsteps, voices, as if someone were in my apartment." Emily hesitated. He didn't seem to be delirious. He seemed to be remembering. "Do you think the accident wasn't an accident?" he ventured. He looked away, but his expression said it all. "I don't know. But when you run an empire, there's always someone who wants to bring you down." It was the first time Ethan had acknowledged, even indirectly, a possible attack. And that thought cut Emily like a blade. If the accident had been intentional, then he was in danger there. And she, because of their proximity, might be too. Days later, a new twist hit the hospital like a sudden storm. Early in the morning, when Emily arrived for her shift, she found reporters crowded in front of the entrance, more numerous than ever. People were shoving microphones, cameras were flashing incessantly, and security guards were trying to keep everyone away. From the middle of the crowd, someone shouted, "Is it true that the heir to Graves Corporation is hospitalized here?" Emily stopped immediately, feeling dizzy. It couldn't be. No one should know. Inside the hospital, the chaos intensified. The board of directors convened hastily. Liam was pale, pacing the corridors with quick steps, and Ava Morgan seemed even more haughty and composed, although her eyes betrayed a calculated irritation. Emily found Ava in the nurse's room, instructing the team with surgical precision. "No one speaks to the press. No one confirms the presence of any specific patient. Any leak will be treated as a serious violation." When Ava left, Liam sighed deeply, moving closer to Emily. "This turned out to be bigger than we imagined." Emily stared at him intently. "Did someone leak the information?" Liam hesitated before replying, "We don't know, but it's no coincidence. There are powerful people manipulating this game." The feeling that Emily was at the center of something dangerous only intensified. The next twist came at night, as Emily was returning to the parking lot after her shift. The streetlights cast long shadows on the damp asphalt. She walked, clutching her purse tightly to her body, when she noticed a man standing near her car. He was wearing a dark suit, had a rigid posture, and an expression that was too neutral to be natural. "Emily Carter?" he asked. She took a step back. "Who are you?" "Someone who wants to prevent you from making mistakes, and who wants to ensure that Ethan Graves stays alive." The name being spoken aloud made her stomach churn. "What do you know about what's going on?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Didn't your superiors tell you? No surprise, they prefer to use it without you realizing it." "Use? What do you mean?" The man gave a slight, enigmatic smile. "Some people believe you have influence over him, and they're right." Emily swallowed hard. "Why? I'm just his nurse." "No. You're the only person he trusts right now, and that makes you a valuable asset, and a dangerous one." Before she could answer, he handed her a black card, with no logo, just a number. "If you notice anything strange, call." The man left, disappearing among the cars as if he had dissolved into the darkness. Emily stood there, trembling, feeling the weight of forces she didn't fully understand, pressing down on her shoulders. The following morning, upon returning to the hospital, she found Liam and Ava in a heated argument in the director's office. The doors were open wide enough for her to hear. "You're interfering too much," Liam accused. "I'm making sure the company doesn't collapse because of an unconscious man and a naive nurse," Ava retorted. Emily froze. They were talking about her, and at that moment he understood that the war wasn't just a corporate one. It was personal. It was about power, control, and Ethan was at the center of it all. And she, for some inexplicable reason, was the variable that no one could predict, and that everyone tried to manipulate. Discoveries were piling up, each more terrifying than the last. The web was closing in, and Emily, unwittingly, was trapped in it. The escalation of conflicts was not going to stop, and the next turning point would be decisive. St. Augustine Hospital seemed about to explode, not literally but emotionally, as if every person, every room, every decision was hanging by a thread, about to snap. And Emily, unwittingly, was right in the center of that invisible thread. In the days that followed the revelations and veiled threats, the pressure increased exponentially. Ethan worsened. Not physically, on the contrary, his body was making progress in its recovery, but mentally. He seemed restless, confused, as if fragmented memories were finally connecting, but in a painful and threatening way. On a particularly quiet afternoon, while Emily was checking her vital signs, he stared intently at her. "I remembered something," he murmured. She looked up immediately. "What?" Ethan took a deep breath. "Someone called me on the day of the accident, minutes before. It was a voice, saying that I needed to understand my position." Emily felt a tingle on her skin. "Did you recognize the voice?" He hesitated for several long seconds. "I'm not sure, but I think it was someone from my own board." The hypothesis hit them like a bombshell. If it were true, then there was an inside conspiracy, and it was growing. From that day on, strange events began to accumulate. First, Ethan's medical record disappeared from the electronic system for a few hours. When it returned, there were entries that Emily knew weren't there before. Altered notes, false blood pressure readings, inconsistent dates. Someone had been tampering with the documentation. Secondly, one of Ethan's physiotherapists was abruptly replaced for internal reasons, and the new professional seemed more concerned with observing than treating. Third, Emily began to feel like she was being followed. A black car would frequently appear parked near her house. Footsteps would echo behind her when she left the hospital late, but would disappear when she looked back. Liam also seemed different, more tired, more worried, and above all, more protective of Emily, though this made her even more suspicious. One night, he practically ran into Ethan's ward. "Emily, you need to be careful," he said quietly. "Do you know something I don't?" Liam closed the door, taking a deep breath. "There are people on the board who want to take over the company by force. With Ethan out, they gain ground. With Ethan dead..." He didn't finish. Emily stood paralyzed, feeling the ground disappear beneath her feet. "Is it that serious?" Liam nodded. "It's serious, and you're too close." Tensions reached a peak when Ava Morgan called an emergency meeting with the medical team caring for Ethan. Emily was forced to attend. The conference room was cold and overlit. Ava entered, accompanied by two men in dark suits. They weren't security guards. They were something worse, corporate lawyers. "Starting today, patient Ethan Graves will be transferred to a private ward with extremely restricted access," Ava announced. Emily felt her stomach clench. "I need to remain responsible for his direct care," he argued. Ava smiled without any emotion. "Actually, it's not necessary." Liam stood up from his chair, indignant. "That doesn't make sense. She's the professional he trusts. The change will hinder his recovery." Ava turned slowly to face him. "Recovery is not our priority at the moment." The phrase echoed like a blow. Emily stared at Ava, trying to understand the subtext. Ava knew. She knew much more than she let on. And at that moment, Emily realized something. Ava wasn't just reorganizing the hospital. She was moving pieces to remove Emily from the game. Before anyone could respond, one of the lawyers handed Emily a document, a temporary restraining order, citing conflict of interest. Emily felt her hands trembling. "That's absurd." I didn't do anything wrong. Ava tilted her head. But you can do it. Emily opened her mouth to protest, but Liam placed a hand on her arm, signaling silence. His gaze said it all. Not there. Not like that. That night, unable to stay still, Emily returned to the hospital even though she was officially on leave. She used her still active access card to enter through the back. She needed to see Ethan. She needed to warn him. But upon reaching the private wing, he found 2 security guards blocking the entrance. Restricted access. I'm his nurse. It's not anymore. She turned around, her heart pounding, but found someone in the hallway, the man with the black card, the same one who had approached her in the parking lot days before. I figured you would come, he said. Emily approached, desperate. He's in danger, isn't he? The man took a deep breath. What's happening is bigger than you imagine. There are documents, actions, decisions that Ethan made in the months before the accident, and a lot of people didn't like it. Then the accident. It wasn't an accident. The hallway fell into absolute silence. Emily could barely breathe. You need to get out of here, the man said firmly. I'm not going to leave him alone. If you stay, they'll use you against him. They're already trying. The man's eyes revealed something Emily hadn't expected, genuine concern. So stop running in the dark. Start looking for answers. He handed her a thin envelope. When you're in a safe place, open it, and don't tell anyone you received it. No one. Then he disappeared. Emily left the hospital with an overwhelming certainty. Everything was about to fall apart, and there were only 2 options: flee or fight. She chose to fight, because now she wasn't just his nurse. She was the only person who could stop Ethan Graves from dying before he found out who wanted to destroy him. The early morning seemed darker than usual when Emily parked her car 2 blocks from home. She didn't want to take any risks, not after receiving that mysterious envelope. Her breathing was uneven, and her hands still trembled slightly as she held the sealed paper. She hurried up the stairs, making sure no one followed her, and only then locked the door behind her. The silent house seemed to breathe along with her. Only after closing all the curtains did Emily finally open the envelope. There were 2 items inside: a photo and a copy of a document. The photo appeared to have been taken with a cell phone from a distance, showing Ethan in a modern meeting room. Next to him was Ava Morgan. They were both intensely discussing something. In the corner of the image, the date, 2 days before the accident. The document, on the other hand, was more sinister. A letter of resignation, forced, that was supposedly signed by Ethan, ceding a majority stake in Graves Industries to the board of directors, dated the same day as the accident. Emily put her hand to her mouth, shocked. They tried to remove him from power, and when he didn't give in, the thought remained suspended, cold as ice. It was at that moment that she made a decision. She would no longer be just a spectator in a game that was slowly killing Ethan. She was going to act. The next morning, Emily found Liam in the hospital parking lot. He was leaning against his car, looking like he hadn't slept. "Emily, where were you yesterday? I was looking for you." She stared at him carefully. After the envelope, everything and everyone was suspect. "I needed to think. Are you well?" Emily hesitated. She wanted to trust him, but something inside her screamed at her to be cautious. "I am. Just tired." Liam studied her face for a few seconds, as if trying to decipher her. "Access to the private wing has been closed to almost everyone. They've installed new security, new cameras. It looks like a prison." Emily felt a chill. "And you were able to see it?" "No, they stopped me too." His expression was filled with frustration. "Something's going on in there." "I know. That's it," Emily thought. "And now I have proof." But he said nothing. Before they could continue, Liam's cell phone vibrated. He answered it and took a few steps back. Emily watched discreetly. He was speaking softly, too softly. It was impossible not to be suspicious. When he returned, he simply said, "I have to go. We'll talk later." Emily stood there, with the feeling that each piece on the board was moving too fast. and some were moving in the dark. With her decision made, Emily headed to another location, the office of an investigative journalist she knew from previous cases at the hospital. Clara Jensen was famous for exposing corporate scandals and, more importantly, for protecting her sources. Clara opened the door with a surprised expression. "Emily, I thought I'd never see you again outside of a shift. I need your help, and it's urgent." Clara led her inside without question. The small office was crammed with files, newspapers, and screens displaying news in real time. "What happened?" Emily took a deep breath. "It's about Ethan Graves. And I think they tried to kill him." Clara's eyes widened immediately. "Sit down and tell me everything." Emily recounted everything. Not everything, but enough. The accident, the dispute with the board, the sudden dismissal, the falsified documents, the mysterious envelope. The journalist noted every detail with fierce attention. "And you have this with me?" Emily handed over the envelope and watched Clara quickly examine the documents. "This is explosive. If it's authentic, someone's going down. Several people, actually." Emily swallowed hard. "Can you check?" "I can. But Emily, once I start this, there's no going back. You'll become a target." Emily thought of Ethan, trapped in that private wing, surrounded by people who wanted his downfall. "I'm already a target," Clara nodded. "Then leave it to me." Hours later, Emily received a message from an unknown number. "Your friend isn't who you think he is. Stop investigating." She froze. The message had been sent along with a photo. A photo taken that same day, her entering Clara's building. Emily felt her heart race dangerously. She was being watched closely, and the threat was no longer veiled. She impulsively typed a reply, but deleted it before sending. Fear overflowed, but beneath it a new rage was rising, strong, hot, unyielding. "They think they can intimidate me. They can't." Later, at the hospital, Emily tried to approach the private ward just to observe the activity. Unfamiliar men were coming and going. A medical team she had never seen before had taken over the shift. The atmosphere was heavy, almost military. That's when she heard something that made her stomach drop. 2 employees were talking near the elevators. "The CEO will receive a new medication today." But wasn't he getting better? Order from the board. New clinical guideline. New guideline! Emily knew exactly what this could mean. Prolonged sedation, induction of a coma, or worse. She didn't think, she just acted. She ran to the main reception area, grabbed an extra lab coat, safety glasses, and an empty clipboard. She changed her hairstyle, adjusted her name tag to cover her name, and strode toward the private wing with firm steps. She pretended to be in a hurry, head down, busy expression. The security guards watched her, but she kept her gaze fixed on the corridors as if she had every right to be there. He even managed to get through the first door, but it was stopped on Monday. Identification. Emily handed over the badge, which was falsely covered by her hands. The security guard looked at him suspiciously. "You're not on the list." She held her breath. Before he could answer, a voice echoed behind them. "She's with me." Emily turned around, surprised. It was Liam. His gaze was indecipherable. "She has permission," he added. The security guards hesitated and opened the door. Emily walked in, and at that moment, she realized that trust, essential for surviving what was to come, was officially broken. She no longer knew if Liam had saved her or just delivered it. The door slammed shut behind them with a metallic click, muffling the sounds of the hospital and trapping Emily in a silence that felt more dangerous than any scream. She turned to Liam immediately, her heart pounding in her chest. "What are you doing?" Liam didn't respond immediately. He simply gestured for her to move out of the camera's field of vision. They walked together to a small storage room inside the private wing, where he closed the door and took a deep breath. "You shouldn't be here, Emily. But you just brought me here. To fish. Because if I didn't do this, they would arrest you, or worse. You don't understand what you're getting yourself into. Emily stared at him with growing distrust. And do you understand, Liam? Because to me it seems like you've been in the middle of this from the beginning. Liam ran a hand over his face, tired, almost defeated. I can't explain everything right now. I just want you to trust me. Emily took a step back. Trust. Liam, you disappear, reappear, talk in secrets, receive strange calls, and know too much. How do you expect me to trust you? He opened his mouth to reply, but an alert echoed down the hallway. A deep, continuous ringing, not a standard emergency alarm, but a specific warning from the private wing. Liam turned pale. Something is happening to Ethan. Emily ran out before Liam could stop her. He pushed open the storage room door, stormed down the hallway like a hurricane, and turned left, where he knew Ethan's room was. 2 security guards were trying to stop a medical team that was rushing in, carrying a tray of medication. "Move! He's collapsing! We have orders to check every administration!" The confusion was the perfect loophole. Emily took advantage of the situation and entered the room from the back, dodging a cart of equipment. Ethan's heart monitor was beeping irregularly. He was pale, sweating and breathing heavily, as if his body were being pushed beyond its limits by some intervention. "Ethan?" she called, approaching. His eyes opened for a brief, confused moment, but he recognized her. "Emily," she grabbed his hand. "Stay with me. Don't let them erase you." The machine beeped loudly again. Emily looked at the infusion pump and froze. There was a new medication inside, with a dosage far too high for any permitted procedure. "No, it can't be." She found the label. "Sedative BZ47, maximum dose." That wasn't treatment. It was a silencing. Emily turned off the device without hesitation. A doctor entered the room at that moment. "Who authorized you to touch the equipment?" Emily glared at her furiously. "What are you doing with him?" "Orders from above. Interfere again, and you will be forcibly removed." The doctor tried to turn the equipment back on, but Emily grabbed her wrist. "He could go into respiratory arrest with that dose. The risks were accepted." Emily felt her stomach churn. Risks accepted by whom? Certainly not by Ethan. Before the argument escalated, Liam entered the room, breathless. "Stop, all of you." The doctor turned around, indignant. "Who do you think you are?" Liam pulled a black card from his pocket, the same type as the mysterious man's, and showed it to her. The doctor turned pale. "Understood," she said, and left the room immediately without looking back. Emily stood frozen, staring at the card, then at Liam. "So it's true." Her voice was almost a whisper. "You work for them." Liam closed the door, locked it, and approached her, exhausted. "Emily, listen to me. I don't work for the board. I've been secretly investigating them for months. I work for Ethan's internal corporate security unit. I was protecting you both." "Protecting? All you did was confuse me. Because if you had known too soon, you would be dead." Emily swallowed hard. "And now they know you're involved. The envelope, the visit to the journalist. You've become a direct target." She felt her legs tremble, but she stood firm beside Ethan's bed. "I'm not leaving here." Liam stared at her for long seconds, as if recognizing an undeniable truth there. "I know." In the following minutes, Liam began to explain, finally. Ethan discovered that the board planned to sell part of the company to an international fund without transparency. He tried to stop it, and he almost succeeded, but they pressured him. They wanted him to sign his resignation. He refused. Then they sabotaged the car. "Try." Emily took a deep breath, feeling the world spin. "And Ava?" Liam hesitated. "She's at the center of everything, and worse, she's smart enough to never leave a direct trace." Emily looked at Ethan, asleep, frail, trapped by wires and machines. "They'll try again, and again." "Yes, until they get him out of the way." "Then we have to act now." Liam nodded slowly, "but not alone. I'll take you to a safe place tonight, and tomorrow we'll go get Clara again. She could reveal everything. What if they find us first? Then we ran faster. To his surprise, Emily offered a brief smile, tired but determined. Liam, I'm not afraid of them. I know. He looked at Ethan. He wouldn't have either. When they left the room, Emily felt something different inside. Fear, of course, anger, without a doubt, but above all, a courage she didn't know she possessed, a strength that came not only from wanting to save Ethan, but from finally refusing to be a passive piece on the chessboard. Now she had a purpose, and he wasn't going to back down, because for the first time since the accident, the pieces were shifting, and Emily Turner, the simple nurse who didn't know half the secrets, was beginning to become the key to bringing it all down, and everyone. Night fell over St. Augustine Hospital like a thick, almost solid veil, concealing more than it revealed. Emily and Liam left the building through a little-used side exit, an emergency door whose lock Liam seemed to know all too well. Emily didn't question it. She already understood enough. Liam carried secrets, but he wasn't her enemy. At least, she hoped he wasn't. As she stepped outside, the cold air hit her face, bringing the sense of alertness she needed to stay focused. The parking lot was almost empty, with only a few lights flickering in the darkness. Let's go quickly, Liam said, pointing to an unassuming black car parked in the shade. Is it yours? It's safe. Emily wasn't sure if she believed it, but there was no better alternative. She got into the car. The interior smelled of leather and metal, and something else, perhaps urgency. Liam accelerated before she even fastened her seatbelt. Where are we going? She asked. First, we need to get out of the city. Then, I have a contact who can give us temporary shelter. Emily glanced at him. You have many contacts. Liam didn't smile. In my job, this means survival. The dark road rushed past the windows, but Emily could barely see the road ahead. Her mind was on Ethan. He was alone, vulnerable, surrounded by people who wanted to erase him. The mere thought made her chest ache, as if an invisible pressure were squeezing her heart. Liam, she said softly. Yes. What if they do something to him while we're away? Liam took a deep breath. I left someone I trust keeping watch. If anything happens, we'll know immediately. Emily clasped her hands together, unable to calm down. I promised him I wouldn't let anyone hurt him. And it won't. But you can't protect him if you're dead. The words hit Emily like a punch, but she understood the meaning. She was being hunted. She was no longer just a dedicated nurse. She was a threat to the system that years of corruption had built, and powerful people didn't let threats survive. They arrived at an old, isolated country house, hidden among dense trees. No neighbors, no cameras, no sign of modernity. The place seemed frozen in time. Is this it? For now. Liam turned on the interior light. Emily entered cautiously. The room was simple, with old furniture and the smell of damp wood. Who lives here? A friend, but he's out of the country. He gave me full access. Emily sat on the worn sofa, finally feeling the weight of everything collapsing on top of her. The shadows in the room seemed alive, and the stillness brought more questions than answers. Liam placed a bottle of water in front of her. Drink. You haven't stopped drinking since early afternoon. Emily obeyed. Liam, what happens now? He sat down opposite her with a serious expression. Now we're planning our move. Clara is already checking the authenticity of the documents. As soon as she confirms, we can reveal everything. What if Ava acts first? She's going to act. She's probably already moving pieces, and if they find out you have proof, Emily felt the pressure in her chest increase. If they find out, but it was too late. They already knew. Liam seemed to read her thoughts. Don't go back to the apartment. It's being monitored, and don't talk to anyone who isn't in this room. She nodded. I understand. Hours later, just when Emily thought she could finally close her eyes, her cell phone vibrated. The number was unknown, but the message was clear. We have your man, finally. Emily's blood ran cold. Immediately, another message appeared. this time with a photo. Ethan, unconscious, being transferred on a stretcher into an ambulance with no hospital markings. Emily let out a muffled sound. "They're taking him out of the hospital." Liam jumped up. "Let me see." Emily handed over the phone with trembling hands. Liam quickly scanned the image. "This isn't a medical evacuation. It's a corporate kidnapping." "Then we have to go after them." "Emily, calm down. I'll go after you, with or without you." She stood up, determined. Liam held her by the shoulders. "I know where the council's private facilities are. They have a clandestine medical center. That's where they're taking him." "Then let's go." Liam hesitated. "It's too dangerous. He's all that matters now. And you think you don't matter to me?" Silence fell between them, heavy, full of truths that could not be spoken. Emily looked away, trying not to succumb to the emotional impact of the sentence. "Liam, I can't leave him alone." "I know." He took a deep breath. "I'll get the car ready. We have 30 minutes before we lose the trail." Emily nodded, her eyes burning with contained emotion. While Liam was organizing equipment in the trunk, flashlights, first aid kit, lightweight tactical vests, Emily felt something change inside her. It wasn't just fear. It wasn't just anger. It was the crystallization of everything I had experienced in the last few weeks. The quiet girl from Ohio, the dedicated nurse that everyone underestimated, the woman who vowed to protect a patient who had no idea who she was, nor who she would become because of him. Now, Emily was someone with purpose, with courage, with fire, and she was prepared to confront the board, Ava, private security guards, and anyone else who tried to stop Ethan from surviving the web of betrayals he himself had uncovered. When Liam returned, she was ready. "Shall we go?" Emily took a deep breath. "Let's go get him." And with that, they got into the car, both knowing that from then on, everything would change. And the truth was finally about to explode. The town was still asleep when Liam and Emily left the country house and returned to the road, now narrower, winding and surrounded by trees that seemed to bend before the speed of the car. The clock on the dashboard read 3:12 a.m., the kind of time when secrets moved more freely and when no one expected witnesses. Emily kept her eyes glued to her phone, desperately waiting for another message, a location, any clue. But nothing came. The digital silence was deafening. Liam drove with almost mechanical precision, tense, focused. "We're 20 minutes from the facility," he said, without taking his eyes off the road. "What if they change destiny?" "Nothing changes. The clandestine medical center is where they do everything that can't appear in official reports. They won't risk a longer transfer." Emily clenched her fingers, trying to control her breathing. "He was unconscious." "Liam, what if—" "Don't finish that sentence." His voice wasn't gruff, but firm. "Emily, you need to keep your head on straight. He's alive, and we're going to get him out of there, understood?" She nodded, even though fear was still stuck in her throat. The installation stood out like a stain in the middle of the forest. A grey, windowless building surrounded by high walls and rotating cameras. A structure that said everything without saying anything. That place shouldn't exist, and that's precisely why it was so well protected. Liam parked the car 200 meters away, in a dark area where the trees clustered together like silent accomplices. "Let's go on foot," quietly. Emily took a deep breath and followed him. The air was cold and damp, and each step seemed to carry the weight of an irreversible decision. Liam examined the fence. "There's a blind spot on the left side. The cameras cycle for 9 seconds. When I tell you to, you go through. And you? Right behind." When they finally crossed the wall, Emily felt her heart pounding so hard that she was afraid it could be heard inside. They entered through a side door, deliberately destroyed, probably meant to be used only by those who knew how to manipulate the internal system. Liam clearly did. The hallway lighting was dim, almost yellowish, creating long, strange shadows that moved with the intermittent flickering of the lamps. "The medical wing is in the basement," Liam whispered. They descended a narrow staircase. Each step creaked under their weight, even as they tried to move lightly. At the bottom of the stairs, a grey door blocked their path. Liam pulled something from his pocket, a digital key. "How do you have that?" Emily asked. He didn't answer. He just pressed the device against the panel next to the door. A metallic click echoed. The door opened. What they saw inside made Emily gasp for air. It wasn't just a clandestine medical center. It was a living archive. Shelves upon shelves filled with files, illegal medications, surgical equipment that didn't belong to any regulated hospital. There were computers turned on, displaying graphs, results, reports, names, hundreds of names. Among them were several she recognized, patients from St. Augustine, people who died mysteriously, people who didn't respond to treatment, altered medical records, forged signatures. "Oh my God," Emily whispered, covering her mouth. Liam stared at everything with a look heavy, with something dark. "They've been doing this for years." Emily turned to him. "Liam, did you know?" The question hung over the two of them like a heavy burden. Liam took a deep breath. That second was too long, too scary. "I knew something was wrong. I didn't know it was this." Emily didn't have time to react. A noise echoed down the hallway. Voices, footsteps. Liam grabbed her hand. "Emily, get ready. What we're about to discover is bigger than we imagined." And before they could hide, a door at the back of the laboratory opened. And there was Ethan, but not as she expected, and not alone. And what she saw made the ground disappear beneath her feet. Months later, St. Augustine Hospital was operating under new management, and Ethan Parker's name would finally cease to be a whisper laden with mystery, becoming instead a symbol of courage. Emily walked down the now silent, illuminated corridor, feeling each step taking her further away from that dark past. Liam, acquitted and promoted after revealing everything to the authorities, waited near the exit. Ethan, recovered and more present than ever, watched them both with a discreet smile, a smile that said, "History only changed because you changed everything, Emily," she breathed. If this story made you reflect on courage, choices and secrets that can change destinies, share your impressions and subscribe to the channel and let your voice echo alongside Emily, Ethan, and Liam's journey. Stories come alive when they reach new readers. Every opinion, theory, or emotion helps expand the world we create here. Comment on what surprised you most, which character touched you the most, and what ending you would imagine for them. Your participation keeps this narrative alive. Let's continue exploring new paths, new emotions, and new mysteries together. Want to embark on the next story?